Welcome back, everyone, to Healing Growth. I'm so happy to have you all here. This is the channel where we, kind of try to unpack all of those fascinating and sometimes messy parts of relationships, all the things that make us go, wait a minute, what just happened?
And today we are tackling a real doozy. It's ghosting. It's become so common in the dating world that you'd think it was like a new Olympic sport or something. Disappearing without a trace.
Huh. Yeah. I'd give the gold medal for the most confusing communication style to ghosting.
Yeah.
But really, though, it can be so incredibly hurtful and just plain bewildering. And actually, I know someone who has experienced this firsthand. Mika, care to share your story with our listeners?
Sure. There's this guy, Ben. We met at a friend's game night. We both loved board games, and he was really funny. We just clicked. We traded numbers, and we texted for a couple weeks. We even made plans to try out that new escape room downtown.
Well, that sounds promising.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, the day of the escape room, total radio silence. He didn't answer my text asking if he was ready to break out. Nothing. At first, I thought maybe he was just running late, but then hours went by and I sent another text. Still nothing. And then it hit me. Ghosted.
Oh, Mika.
Yes.
So sorry. That's rough. And you know what? If anyone listening has ever been ghosted, please know that you're not alone. It's sadly a super common experience these days.
Yeah, it really is. And that's actually why we're here today. To take a deep dive into the psychology of ghosting, we have some super insightful research and expert opinions to help us understand why people ghost in the first place, why it hurts so much, and most importantly, how to deal with it. So if you're looking for clarity and maybe a little bit of healing, you're in the right place.
Exactly. And if you find this deep dive helpful, we would absolutely love for you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with anyone who might be going through something similar. Your support means the world to us.
Now, let's get down to business. First things first. What exactly is ghosting? Our sources define it as the sudden stop of all communication with someone, with absolutely no explanation.
So it's not just taking a few hours or even a day to reply. It's intentionally cutting off all contact.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so confusing and so hurtful. It leaves the person being ghosted with this void of information, and our brains are hardwired to try and fill in the blanks.
It's like our minds are desperately trying to come up with an explanation, a reason, anything to make sense of the silence.
Precisely. And that's where the psychological impact of ghosting really comes in. It can trigger all sorts of feelings like rejection, abandonment, even betrayal.
Yeah, like you said, Mika, that need to create a narrative often leads to blaming yourself. We start to question everything. What did I do wrong? Was I too boring? Did I say something weird?
Right, and that can seriously chip away at your self-esteem, which is why it is so important to remember that ghosting says way more about the ghoster's issues than anything you did.
I know. But that's much easier said than done when you're in the middle of it and feeling so hurt, right? So help us understand this a little better. What does the research say about why people do this?
Well, one really prominent psychologist, Dr. Janice Vilhauer, argues that ghosting often boils down to emotional immaturity and avoiding conflict. Basically, people who ghost often lack the skills to navigate difficult conversations or handle uncomfortable emotions in a healthy way.
So they choose what seems like the easy way out,
Yeah,
but they end up causing even more pain for the other person.
exactly. It's ironic, really. Ghosting might feel like a quick fix for the ghoster, but it really leaves a lasting impact on the person they're leaving behind.
It's like throwing a communication grenade and then running away, leaving the other person to deal with the emotional fallout.
Whoa, that is a powerful image. And sadly, that fallout can be pretty intense. Our sources highlight some serious psychological effects of this sudden cutoff. For instance, one study found that social rejection, like being ghosted, activates the same pain pathways in the brain as physical pain.
Wow, really? So it literally hurts to be ghosted. No wonder it feels so awful.
Yeah, it does. And it's not just the emotional pain either. That uncertainty and lack of closure can lead to what's called rumination, those obsessive looping thoughts about what went wrong. And that can really mess with your sleep, your concentration, your overall well-being.
Okay, so we're starting to see how ghosting is much more than just bad manners. It's a legitimate psychological blow. But before we dive too deep into the doom and gloom, let's talk about what we can actually do about it. What are some practical strategies for dealing with being ghosted?
Well, first and foremost, resist that urge to chase after closure from the ghoster. I know it's tempting to reach out, demand an explanation, try to understand.
Oh, believe me, I get it. It's like this itch you just have to scratch, even if you know it's only going to make it worse.
Exactly. And as one of our sources who is a relationship therapist puts it, chasing closure from someone who ghosted you is like asking a thief to explain why they stole your wallet. They've already shown you they don't respect your feelings.
Right? You're not going to get a rational explanation.
Yeah.
And trying to get one is just going to prolong the agony. So what's a healthier way to approach it?
Well, instead of looking for closure from the ghoster, try shifting your focus inward. This is where self-validation becomes super important.
Okay, I like that. Can you explain a little more about what self-validation looks like in this kind of situation?
Sure. It's about consciously reminding yourself that being ghosted is not a reflection of your worth. It's about recognizing your own good qualities, all the things that make you a valuable friend, partner, human being.
So it's about actively fighting back against that voice of self-doubt that creeps in after being ghosted.
You got it. And I know that can be tough, especially when you're feeling so raw and vulnerable. So this is where having a strong support system can be such a lifesaver.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Your friends, family, a therapist, anyone you trust who can offer a listening ear and a good dose of reality. Sharing what you're going through can help you process all those difficult emotions and gain some perspective. It's like having a team of emotional first responders. They come in, assess the damage, and help you start to heal.
Exactly. And speaking of healing, one of our sources, a mindfulness coach, suggested a really interesting technique for coping with being ghosted, reframing the experience as redirection.
Wait, hold on. How do you reframe something as painful as being ghosted into something positive?
Well, instead of dwelling on the rejection and what you might have done wrong, try to see it as an opportunity for something better to come along. It's like the universe is saying, hey, this person wasn't right for you, so I'm closing this door to open a new one.
Oh, I like that. It takes the focus off of the ghoster and puts it back on you and your own journey.
Exactly. It's about trusting that something better is out there, even if you can't see it yet. And it's a great reminder that we have the power to choose how we respond to tough situations.
So instead of letting ghosting wreck our self-esteem, we can use it as a chance for growth and reflection.
Absolutely. And one area where reflection can be super helpful is communication. Being ghosted can be a wake-up call to look at our own communication needs and patterns.
It's interesting. What do you mean by communication needs?
It's about understanding how we like to give and receive information, how we show our emotions, and how we deal with conflict. Are we direct communicators or are we more indirect? Do we need to check in often or do we prefer more space?
So it's about knowing our own communication style.
Exactly. And being mindful of the communication style of the people we're dating. Ghosting is a perfect example of a communication mismatch. One person wants to talk and the other is shutting down completely.
So being ghosted could be a sign that you and that person just weren't on the same page when it came to communication, which is good information to have for future relationships.
Definitely. It's a reminder to pay attention to how someone communicates early on. Do they really listen? Do they answer your texts and calls? Are they willing to have difficult conversations when they need to happen?
Those are all good things to keep in mind. It sounds like paying attention to how someone communicates can help us spot those red flags early on.
You got it. And speaking of red flags, our sources really stress the importance of setting healthy boundaries in our relationships. Being ghosted is a total violation of a boundary, the boundary of respect and basic communication.
So true. How can we set boundaries in a way that feels empowering and not controlling?
Well, it starts with knowing what you will and will not put up with, and then being clear and assertive about those boundaries. For example, if someone is always canceling plans at the last minute or leaves you hanging without explanation, you could say something like, hey, I get that things come up, but when our plans change all the time, it makes me feel like you don't value my time. In the future, I'd appreciate it if you could give me a heads up if something changes.
So just stating your needs and what you expect in a calm and direct way.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that your feelings are valid and you deserve respect.
You're not being needy or overreacting by setting boundaries. You're taking care of yourself and protecting your emotional well-being.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and open communication.
It's not about trying to control someone else. It's about creating a space where both people feel safe and respected and can thrive.
That's a great way to put it. And since we're talking about thriving, let's shift gears and talk about what we can do to take care of ourselves after being ghosted. Because even though we can understand why it happens intellectually, it still hurts.
For sure. So besides getting support and trying to reframe the situation,
Yeah.
what are some good self-care strategies?
One thing our sources emphasize is the importance of validating your own feelings. Let yourself feel the hurt, the anger, the confusion, whatever comes up. Don't try to push those feelings down or beat yourself up for having them.
So giving ourselves permission to grieve the loss of that potential relationship, even if it was short-lived.
Right. Bottling up those emotions will only make it harder to heal. And once you've acknowledged your feelings, try focusing on things that bring you joy and make you feel good.
So this is where those classic self-care practices come in, like taking a nice bath, going for a walk in nature, listening to music.
Exactly. It's about making a conscious choice to do things that soothe your mind, body, and spirit. And remember, self-care isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing practice of putting your well-being first.
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and compassion you would offer a friend.
Beautifully said. And speaking of friends, don't underestimate the power of connecting with your loved ones. Hanging out with people who make you laugh and support you no matter what can be a really powerful way to combat that loneliness and self-doubt that can come after being ghosted.
It reminds you that you are loved and worthy of connection, even if one person chose to disconnect.
Exactly. And if you're having a hard time dealing with the emotional fallout of being ghosted, don't hesitate to talk to a therapist. They can provide a safe space to process what you're going through and develop healthy coping skills.
Therapy can be such an amazing tool for healing and growth. It reminds us that we don't have to go through this alone.
That's so true. And, while being ghosted can be a really painful experience, it can also be a chance for learning and growing.
Okay, I'm curious. How can we turn this negative experience into something positive?
Well, for one thing, it can teach us so much about our needs and boundaries in relationships. It can also help us refine our red flag radar, so we can be more selective about who we date.
So like a crash course in relationship awareness.
Exactly. And it can motivate us to become better communicators ourselves.
So instead of seeing it as a personal failure, we can use it to get better at communication.
Exactly. It pushes us to be more clear and effective in how we express ourselves,
Yeah.
how to set boundaries with grace and how to really advocate for what we need in a relationship.
You know, this whole conversation has really made me think about how ghosting isn't limited to romantic relationships. We see it in friendships, families, even at work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like ghosting has become the go-to way to avoid things in so many parts of our lives.
Which makes me wonder, is there something about our culture that's contributing to this ghosting epidemic?
That's a fascinating question. One of our sources, a sociologist, suggested that the rise of social media and online dating could be a factor. With so many potential connections right there at our fingertips, it's easy to just swipe left and move on. It's easier than putting in the time and effort to communicate effectively.
It's almost as if we've become numb to ghosting because it's so common online.
That's a great observation. I think it highlights how important it is to be intentional about how we connect with others, both online and offline.
So even though technology has made it easier to ghost someone, we still have the power to choose a different path, a path of respect, honesty, and open communication.
I couldn't agree more. In the end, I think the way to combat ghosting is to create a culture of clear and compassionate communication.
And that begins with each and every one of us. So if you're listening, I encourage you to think about your own communication patterns. How can you be more direct and honest in your relationships? How can you set boundaries in a way that makes you feel strong? And how can you really show up for others, even when it's hard?
Such good questions. I think the answers are found in choosing to be vulnerable instead of avoiding things, even when it feels uncomfortable.
It's about remembering that we're all human. We make mistakes, and we all deserve to be treated with kindness and respect, even when relationships end.
I love that. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to just say, hey, this isn't working for me, instead of disappearing.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. Thank you so much. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of ghosting and how to deal with it.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I hope our listeners feel equipped to break the cycle of ghosting, both by setting healthy boundaries and by communicating with more clarity and compassion.
Absolutely. So before we go, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Any last bits of wisdom?
You know what? I would love for our listeners to think about one thing that really stood out to them from this deep dive. What resonated with you? And what's one small step you can take this week to create more authentic and fulfilling connections in your life?
What a great question. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights and experiences can help us all learn and grow together.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure.
Okay, everyone, that's a wrap for today's episode of Healing Growth. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay true to yourselves.